Well, good morning, everyone. This is our attempt to try and convert some of our programs to a virtual means. And so bear with us as we kind of start this procedure off. But what we want to do actually is give credit to one of our old master gardeners, Sam Scarcella. This is actually a legacy program that Sam started back in the 80s, the late 80s, and before he passed away, he asked that we, myself in particular, to continue this thing. So a lot of the things you see in this program were started by Sam, and it's just a continuation as we learn things and try things out. So with that, I'd like to start the program. What you're going to have here is a little bit about what's going on with tomatoes. And we're going to give you a little bit of the trivia. And where do they come from? Well, they're actually originated from the western coast of South America, which is present-day Peru. There's also right now growing in that area about 8 species of tomatoes, which grow wild in the Andes Mountains. A little bit of history, though. The tomato was a very important crop among New World Indians by the 15th century. We know that the Aztecs called it ixtimati, which means a round plump fruit with a navel. Early Aztec writings mentioned dishes comprising of peppers, salt, and tomatoes. We kind of think this was probably the original salsa recipe. Central America tribes that called it tomate, and the tomato made its way across the Atlantic to Europe shortly after Cortez conquered the Aztecs in 1521. But the earliest mention of tomatoes in European literature was found in Italy in 1544. And tomatoes described as pomme d'oro, a golden apple, were eaten with oil, salt, and pepper. So it seems that the yellow varieties may have been the first to reach the old world. The red varieties were introduced to Italy, as far as we know, by 2 Catholic priests many years later, but we don't know exactly the dates when that occurred. And some more trivia, tomatoes became widely cultivated over the next several decades in Spain, Italy, and France, where it was called pomme d'amour, or love apple. It might have been used also as an early aphrodisiac. A little side thing here in German folklore, witches used plants of the nightshade family, and if you know that the tomato is actually part of the nightshade family, to summon werewolves. So it's not surprising that the common German name for tomatoes translates to wolf peach. The scientific name for the tomato is Lycopersicum esculentum, which means edible wolf peach. I got some more, so here we'll continue with this. But plants brought back to the Americas by early British colonists were used as ornamentals. They really weren't eaten. The North American cultures associated the tomato with poisonous members of the nightshade plant family. And in 1596, one English author refers to love apples as being eaten abroad, but having a rank and stinking savor. The first cookbook to mention tomatoes was published in Naples, Italy in 1692. So we got a long history about tomatoes, but I got some more. So in 1781, Thomas Jefferson brought tomatoes to his table along with French fries. You might remember that. He's given credit by many for popularizing tomato use in North American culture. And here closer to us, New Orleans cuisine is reported to have incorporated tomatoes by 1812. It's a number that a year that you can remember from the 1812 wars. Colonel Robert Gibson Johnson supposedly put all doubts about tomatoes being poisonous to rest in 1820 when he ate a small bushel of tomatoes on the Salem, New Jersey court steps, and thousands are reported to have turned out to watch the poor man die, and of course he didn't. And to conclude this, by the late 1800s, Henry Hines was selling ketchup. So it gives you a little history of and a lot of trivia about tomatoes. So here on this particular program, what we're going to cover today, as Ginger said, is part one. It's part one was going to cover. It's the first in the series of the programs, and it's going to focus on growing tomatoes from seeds. And what we have tried to do with these programs is to introduce the programs at the time you are actually going to need them while you're growing your tomatoes. Okay, we should be looking at growing and starting tomatoes in this particular area right around now to start your seed. So, and then the next program will be sometime in January, early February, where now your plants are at a certain size, and we're going to show you how to go ahead and plant them and grow them and take care of them. And then part 3 is the last program. Was now everything is growing well, but guess what? Diseases, insects, and a lot of plant stress on the tomato plants. We teach you how to manage that. So just be aware there are 2 more programs, and we appreciate you joining us for this one. What is this thing? Is it an alien? It's actually a close-up of the tomato seed. Kind of weird, isn't it? And as always, the proverbial question, tomato, is it a fruit or a vegetable? Well, actually, it's both. Botanically, the tomato is a fruit, but from a culinary standpoint, it's used as a vegetable. So I guess that answers your question. Kinfolk, peppers, eggplants, potatoes, they're all part of the nightshade family. Crop rotation should not be done with kinfolk. And one of the things that you might consider as well when you plant your tomatoes, you should also plant your potatoes. The others will take a little later. So why the heck would you want to grow tomatoes from seeds? You can buy them off the shelf. You can buy tomatoes from the grocery store. Well, the ones from the grocery store, they're picked green and they're chemically treated to turn red by using the different chemicals that we have for that. They're refrigerated for shipping, and it's also in the genes. It's a gene mutation that they've bred that deliberately is used to make uniform, pretty scarlet tomatoes, because if they're not uniform and pretty, you don't buy them. There's other mutations that have also produced thicker skins so that they travel well. And all of these things have led to reduced compounds that produce the tasteless tomato that you often flavor, that you also get from, sometimes buy them from the store. Also, the plants and the starts that you buy from some of the big box stores can also be a problem. If you notice, the one on the left, which I bought from one of the big box stores, you can kind of see what happens to the, root structure. It sat too long in a small container with little sun, and it probably wasn't watered or fertilized correctly. So when you buy these things, you're not quite sure what you're getting. And all of this is going to make, when you see something with a root structure like this, it's going to be a slow grower. And having a tomato that's a slow grower is a problem here in Galveston County. There's also that, you can look at this thing and you can see it can also possibly introduce diseases to your garden, not knowing what the soil structure is or what has been picked up along the way. And often, and many times, when I've had people tell me that, they bought from these big box stores and it had a particular tag on it, but that's not what ended up growing that thing. And today they're also getting very expensive, at almost $4 a piece for a start. So, so what are we going to cover in this part 1? Well, first off, we're going to discuss about making a plan before starting your seeds. We also want to help you out in choosing varieties that do well in this area. And one of the more important things, you have to understand the timing of when to start your seedlings, depending on where you live here in Galveston County. And it's also understanding how to start your seedlings, how you're going to get these things to pop up and then take care of them. Then, at a certain point, you're going to have to, pot them up to the transplantings to a bigger container. And we'll show you how to do that and how to harden them off. And then also how to protect your seedlings against diseases. So this is kind of what this program, part 1, is going to cover. And we'll go from that. So let's talk about planning ahead where to plant your tomatoes and how many to grow. you can kind of see from this photograph that they're kind of close, but you can, when you have raised beds, or you have, you're in the North 40 growing tomatoes, whatever it may be, you're going to have to understand some of the requirements to be able to get this thing done and done properly. So you can kind of see through this thing, we've got everything basically in cages. We have them properly staked. We have keep the wind from blowing them over. And the rings you see at the bottom are called watering rings. That's so that when you water, water just doesn't scoot all over the place. It waters deeply the roots. Now, I want you to make a plan that you understand that what's achievable. As you can see, a lot of you guys just plant all kinds of seeds and you're going to jam them up all in one little location, and then you say, man, what happened? So understand what's achievable in the area that you're going to have available to grow them. So we want to pick a site that gives your tomato plants at least 8 hours of sunlight a day. And that's usually the biggest obstacle, because with a lot of people, it's the amount of trees we have, or it's the location or whatever. So in that case, you need to really consider where you're going to put them and how you're going to grow them. If you only get, I think the minimum you can possibly have on the site is 6 hours, and at 6 hours you'll probably have to increase the number of plants, because it just won't produce as much. But also plan here on using a raised bed here in Galveston County. If you have a smallish garden, and that's because of the gumbo soil, and that we have here is not the best because of the pH. The rain causes issues, and with a raised bed, it's also easier to water. And also, while you're doing this, figure out how much space you have available for planting your tomatoes. Wherever you decide that where you're going to plant these things, you're going to need about 2 to 3 feet between each plant. And we recommend about 48 inches between rows if you're going to have a larger garden. And this will help you determine just how many plants, the seedlings, you're going to have to grow to accommodate your area. You can plan to either stake them, trellis them up, or cage them. All's going to work well. We've done this a number of times. It's just some are easier for you to find a choice. You will need water access, and you're going to have to plan to water on a regular basis, because tomatoes are kind of like water hogs. And if you put it back in the North 40 and there's no water around there, and you're going to have to be humping a lot of water in buckets and stuff to keep these things alive. So, keep that into consideration where you plan to put these things. Also, plan ahead where you will start your seedlings and where you're going to place these seedlings. And you understand, and you're also going to have to understand that how many seedlings do I need to grow? We usually say that 1 to 2 plants per person. You might have to increase that if you have less sunlight, but you can always use containers to find that sunlight where you best can have access to it. Then you want to be able to obtain the supplies and necessary items that you need to start your seedlings, as well as a place to work on them. And plan when you will need to start your seedling. Now, this is critical, because depending on where you live in Galveston County, this will depend on your area of the last frost that you're going to have in that area. And it varies a lot here in Galveston County. I mean, by weeks, from the northern part to the southern part. And you want to know, you need to know where you will place your starter plants to get the necessary light it will need to get to grow. So choosing a variety. This is some of the stuff that we do here as Galveston County Master Gardeners. We have tomato trials, and we also, we have collected this information for years on what tomatoes do well in our area. So at the office here, we provide a tomato variety recommendation list. It's getting a little long in the tooth on some of that stuff, and like most varieties, some are no longer available. They'll go great for 4 or 5 years, and then for some reason the seed companies don't longer produce them. So we're always trying to update this thing and tell you which ones are doing the best. Okay, But giving you a little idea about choosing these things, according to the USDA, there are about 25,000 varieties of tomatoes. Not all of them are produced, but some even say there's 10,000 because not all of them are going to be back in production. But regardless, there's still a heck of a lot to choose from. So to give you some ideas of the varieties that these 25,000 or 10,000, whatever you feel can happen, is that we have like the heaviest tomato on record, weighed in at 7 pounds, 12 ounces. The variety was delicious, and it was grown by Gordon Graham of Edmond, Oklahoma in 1986. And Gordon sliced the tomato to make sandwiches for 21 family members. So, I mean, you can got these enormous tomatoes, and you also have the ones that are like, the biggest vine in the world. And that the largest tomato plant grown was a Sun Gold variety, which was recorded in 2000. It reached 65 feet. So, a cage wouldn't quite make this one in length, and was grown by the Nutriculture Limited of Maudesley, Lancashire in the UK. When you're choosing a variety, there's a number of things that you're going to have to consider. There's a determinate variety, there's an indeterminate. Also, these varieties come in early season, mid-season, late season. There's heirloom, there's open pollinated, and there's hybrid. There's all types of different tomatoes with different disease resistances. Then there's the taste, what you like, and also the planned uses. Are you going to can them? You're going to slice them? You're going to salad them? Whatever it may be. So when you're choosing a variety, you have to kind of think of what you might want to do with them. So let's talk about what is the determinate plant growth. This refers to a bush variety that reaches a certain height and then kind of stops growing. It's sort of like a bush. The majority of the fruit's going to grow at the end of the branches, with all fruit production actually maturing within a month or two. And this is the main difference, is that they all tend to come within a month or two. Many varieties are especially suited for growing in pots and smaller gardens. So it's, you don't have the vining that takes place, but you do have this issue sometimes, or not an issue, where it all comes within a month or two. These are good varieties for canning and freezing, since they are ready to harvest within the same time period. And if you want to actually have them throughout the season, you can stagger the planting if you want to stagger production. The indeterminate plant growth tends to grow and produce tomatoes throughout the growing season. It's actually more of a vining thing that continues to grow, and it will continue to produce fruit all along the stem. But for this one, you're going to need extra tall supports for at least 5 feet. And many of them, the varieties can grow to 10 to 15 feet. So, if you're getting a cage, say from one of the stores that's only about 2 or 3 feet tall, you may be out of luck. You may see this thing growing out and then making a left turn and coming down and then going down and see your neighbor. So, you're going to have to kind of look at how you're going to support these things, particularly on the vining ones. But these are also great varieties for salads and sandwiches, and they are available throughout the growing season. So, I mean, it's a good one to have that you're going to maximize your production throughout the season. Now, let's talk about early season varieties. We consider the early season that a tomato matures in 49 to 67 days. And then if a mid-season variety is a tomato that matures between 68 to 75 days. And then a late season variety is a tomato that matures in 76 to 80 days. So these are going to be critical when you're trying to see when you have to start your seedlings, and also what you expect from them in production to somewhat. So when should you start counting the days to maturity? Well, this is a big question that goes round and round for many of us and that grow tomatoes. But so is it when you plant it in the garden, when you start the seeds? And it's very confusing to glean when to start the count. Unfortunately, today there's still no standard definition. Even A&M has different ideas on that. So To give you some guidelines on this, most sources work on the general agreement that if you start the seeds indoor and you transplant it in your garden, and you start counting when you transplant that particular seedling. This also holds true for transplants you purchase. So you're going to look for something when you transplant, something that's between 4 to 6 inches tall with a good central stalk. If you direct sow in the garden, you start counting when the seed germinates, which is usually within a week or two. So this is a little bit this is where it gets confusing, but this is what the general consensus is. But when you talk to a lot of us, some of the gardeners prefer to wait to start counting until the true leaves appear, which should be within another week of that. And these are just general guidelines. I tend to go by the first one, where when you plant something 4 to 6 inches tall, and you start counting more or less from that point. The factors that, of course, that's going to, we have all these things that they tell us on the seed packets are going to be so many days, but there's all kinds of factors that's going to impact the actual number of days to maturity. But weather, of course, will always be the biggest influence. And cold weather can cause seedlings to slow their growth and perhaps even stunt it. So too little or too much rain can also play havoc with the young plants. Too much wind, not enough sun. We have these long periods with no sun. All we're going to stunt the growth and affect the maturity. Soil conditions. Is it well composted and rich in organics is also going to be needed. If it's not well composted, then it's going to have slow growth and affect it also. But in general, we really have ideal growing conditions, but given somewhat reasonable conditions, you can, in the growing period, you can expect the number on the seed packet to be approximate gauge on the days to maturity. It gives you some idea of how long it's going to take to have a tomato mature. Choosing a variety, let's talk about hybrids, which are probably 90% of most of the tomatoes you find in the big box stores or the various areas where seed stores, whatever, where you buy your tomato plants from. But the hybrid tomato is a variety bred by crossing different varieties. In other words, you may have one that basically is a good fast grower, one that basically doesn't produce a good tomato, but it has good disease characteristics. So they breed them together to get the best tomato options that you can get. Usually, like all tomatoes, they're all self-pollinated by wind and insects. And generally, when they are pollinated by the insects, it's the wing action that actually creates the pollination. And the biggest issue we have this, and I've seen this over and over again, is that, people try to keep these seeds, but generally, and I'm not saying all the time, but generally it's a statement that the seeds that you keep from a hybrid will generally not run true. Open pollinated is another variety. Plants, these require cross-pollination by wind, insects, or sometimes, we have to, as the gardener, play the pollinating person to produce the seeds. The seeds generally will breed true and can be saved to produce like tomatoes. Heirloom tomato is basically any tomato variety that is at least 50 years old and not a hybrid. Usually are self-pollinated by wind and insects. The seeds from this variety will also breed true and can be saved to produce like tomatoes. They tend to be late season to varieties in the 80 to 90 day range, which in our area will result in low production, and that's because it gets hot so quick here, which tends to end pollination. Also, when you're looking at a seed package, you'll also be looking at, hopefully, inquiring about disease resistance. And on the back, you'll see that these are the different, they'll have V, F, N, T, A, and a number of other things. So V is verticillium wilt, F is fusarium wilt, and it comes in 3 varieties of problems. It's F is verticillium wilt 1, 2 Fs that you see on the packet will be 2, and 3S3. And there's different strains of the Fusarian wilt. N is a very good one to have. It's nematode resistance. And I want to clearly, you look at that, it's nematode resistance. It's not something that nematode more or less stops nematodes. It's just resistant to it producing nematode modules on it. Tobacco mosaic virus is T. Alternia wilt is A, and stem phylum gray leaf spot is ST. So it just gives you some ideas that you might find. So all of these, the more disease resistant you have, the better luck you have, particularly here in Galveston County. Taste, just give you some ideas on when you're trying to make that selection. Cherry tomatoes are small fruit variety tomatoes, tend to be sweeter than most other tomatoes. Also, the color of the pigment tends to produce different balances of sugars and acids. So the orange, the yellow, and the pink pigments tend to taste milder or sweeter and are less acidic than red tomatoes. And also tomatoes with plenty of foliage, they capture a lot of sunlight, and they can convert more sunlight into sugars and other flavor components. And characteristic of heirlooms is the large leaf foliage, and they have a larger amount of, than most hybrids. And that's why we feel many claim they taste better, because the foliage captures so much of the sunlight. But in the end, no matter what you select, the tomato flavor is a matter of taste, your taste. Some people like the acidic area, some like the sweeter area of flavor. So then we're going to talk about usage. For salads, we usually would grow a small fruited or an heirloom. For sandwiches, we like to use the beefsteaks, heirlooms, and what we call slicing tomatoes.
I think
for canning, we use a paste. Sauces use more of a drier variety like aroma. And this is where the determinants work very well. For soups, stews, any tomato will work here. Even frozen tomatoes will keep their flavor, but when you defrost them, they kind of tend mushy. Salsas uses a drier tomato, generally like aroma. And dried, you can probably use any variety that works, but there are some that you can also use that kind of uses a lot. Aroma is one of them that tends to be used a lot for dried tomatoes. Fried green tomatoes, you want a bigger tomato that, like a slicer, will work best for that. Now this is where I'd like for you, you should have been sent a handout. And if you want to, we can, if you could pull it out, or if you haven't, I'll kind of try to go through it. This variety, this thing is actually available from the county office here. Some of the things, if you look at it, we've identified them as early season, and you can see the disease resistance, whether it's an indeterminate, determinate, the number of days to maturity, the size of the tomato. And you'll also see we have a number of them listed in bold. Those are the ones that we highly recommend that have done very well. In the early season, we tend to like the Early Girl, the Bush Early Girl, and especially one of my favorites is the Park Swapper Improved. For mid-season, we like Better Boy, Big Beef, Celebrity, Champions 2 is also a good one. For the beefsteak, we like the German Giant. Beef Master is also a good one. For Italian paste, we like Super Marzano, and we've tried La Roma 2, which is also another good one. And we're seeing now more varieties of early varieties coming for the Romas that we're in the process of testing. For the small fruit, for the salads, Juliet is an excellent one. Sweet Chelsea, Tiny Tim. The Texas Wild is an heirloom one. It was found in East Texas. They are only about the size of probably your little nail on your finger. The sweetest darn things, absolutely great. All the only thing I would tell you is that when you grow them, you're going to have them a long time because they keep producing and producing, and they'll drop fruit everywhere. So, but when you harvest those smaller ones, sometimes you're better off cutting the bunch off instead of trying to pick the small tomato because you'll just destroy it. Also, there's other varieties that we call miscellaneous that we've just concluded a test on the 4th of July. This only kind of just produces and produces. It produces in 49 days, which is a exceptional short period. So you might want to consider that one. There's also Bush Champion, and Patio is also a good one. So anyway, have a look at this, and it's just a guideline. We continue to grow the list and keep up with it. As we try to hand this out in any one of the tomato programs as well. So I mean, either drop by the office and pick it up if you haven't got it, and it's a good guide to go by when you're trying to select tomato varieties for this area. We also, what we tried here at the office and with the Galveston County Master Gardeners, every intern class we actually do tomato trials. We take 12 varieties and we do 2 plants each, and we grow them what we call old school. You can see the stakes, and we have to tie them up with old T-shirts and stuff. And it's we see, in what I call the most normal conditions that we can come up with, that anybody growing tomatoes for the first time, and then we use that as our criteria for checking its production and everything that we would do to it. And this gives you an idea. You see it's staked, but you can see we also we have these beds, and I'm going to give you some of the test results of 2019. The 2021, because of the COVID issue, the class of 2020 is just finishing up their test, the trials test results, and we will have them for the next one. But for 2019, I just wanted to give you what happened there. In that test, we tested Anna Russia, we did Black Cherry, we did Carmelo, we did Charger, Perron, we did Atlas, which was a big boy, 4th of July, Sun Master, Park Season Starter, Falgoroso, Park Swapper, and Celebrity. Park Swapper, we tend to put those in, and Celebrity as more or less the standard to see how, based on the weather and stuff, we see as our how everything compares to those. So those are our more or less standard items. From the results, the class recommends the 4th of July based on taste, early in the production. The Camelo was taste in production. The Perron was early in production. Falgoroso was also the taste in production, and Sunmaster as well. Not recommended. They didn't like it at all. The production and the taste was Anna Russia. Saving seeds. I guess with this we can take any questions that you might have. No questions. Okay, well, we'll continue on. It means we may have a little quicker. Okay. A lot of people are interested, well, how do you save seeds, say from your heirloom or open pollinated tomatoes? So we'll kind of give you an idea of what you're going to have to go through if you want to save them. So you really feel it's the best taste, it has the size and variety you want for canning, slicing. It's generally best to use a non-hybrid. I mean, I've tried hybrids and generally they're okay, but I have had the odd one that just won't produce. So, I mean, it's if you're going to go through a lot of effort in saving seeds and growing tomatoes, you want to make the best selection so you get the best results. So, but for heirloom and open pollinated tomatoes, they tend to do best in providing true seeds for another season. And you need to save the seeds from more than one healthy plant. And the tomato needs to be at its prime, not overripe. You don't pick up the one that's fallen on the ground and try to save that seed. You want it to get a tomato that it's at its prime and it's hopefully not too ripe. So let's talk about how to go about this. The first step entails nothing more than squeezing a bit of the seed gel or the goo that's in it, mixed out of the cavity of the tomato into a glass. So you can see that we've taken a spoon and you can see the seeds and we're just scooping it out, and we're going to put that into a glass. The gel contains inhibitors or enzymes that keep the seeds from sprouting while inside the fruit. So what you're going to do, you're going to add some water to the seed gel mix to kind of leach and ferment the inhibitors away. You see, you can, by adding the water, you'll see you can start the process. Cover the container with either plastic wrap, cheesecloths, or even the cover, but you will need to poke a few holes in the cover to allow fermentation process to begin. And then you're going to place it in a warm location, usually for 2 to 3 days. After letting the slurry ferment for 2 or 3 days, you remove the cover. I'm going to tell you, when you open that cover, it don't smell nice. And if put it in an area where you don't have to smell it on a daily basis when this thing is actually fermenting. But then you're going to remove any of the seeds, and especially the ones that are floating. The ones that are floating will not germinate. Then you're going to pour the slurry through a fine strainer, and you're going to wash the seeds very well. Then you spread them out on a plate or a paper towel or a coffee filter, and you can let them dry out for a week. But you're going to keep stirring the seeds a few times during the day, during the drying process, to ensure that they evenly dry, and the drying time is usually about a week. But the reason you keep moving them is that you don't want them to start sprouting with, from that plate that when you're trying to dry them out. So once they're dry, you're going to store them in a cool area, ready for starting. And the normal viability for tomato seeds is 4 years at 75 degrees. Now let's talk about that. If you save your seed from the year before, I just want you to think about this. The life of a seed can be cut in half by an increase of just 1% in seed moisture, or by an increase in storage temperature of just a few degrees. So you can cut, putting these seeds in your garage during the Texas summer heat is not the best thing to do. So a simple rule of thumb is that the sum of the storage temperature, in Fahrenheit, and percent relative humidity should never be greater than 100. So you can kind of see that, where you are with that. You can have a lot of damage done to seeds that you've kept in some hot area, or that you carry out to some of the garden and you just leave them out there. But we've had a number of our people that actually we talk to. They tend to believe that the freezer may be the best way if you want really long storage time on seeds. And we've known that from one of our master gardeners, that he basically had put the seeds in a freezer for 10 years, took it out, and had a 90% germination rate. So, this gives you some idea of what can happen with improper storage of seeds.
We did have one question come through.
Okay, might have a question.
It says, in regarding a water ring, what diameter do you suggest? How deep should the soil ring be placed into the soil?
The watering ring is actually what we tend to use. I call it the old vinyl edging that you can find that we staple together, which is approximately 4 inches. And we normally put it in just a couple inches. You don't want to have the ring hold water. You just wanted to keep it from just immediately flowing all over the place. So you're trying to water deep on this in this device. So when you're watering your tomatoes, it has a tendency, when things are flat, it just runs everywhere. So with that, it kind of collects it, holds it back, and then waters the tomato deeply, which is what you're trying to do, and basically focus it there. That answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever place you choose to start your seedlings, they will need to germinate in 7 to 10 days in a moist seed starting mixture, and it needs to be at a temperature of somewhere between 70 and 80 degrees. So putting them outside when it's 40 ain't gonna make it. So you're gonna have to, what I used to do myself until my wife got kind of upset with me is that, around Christmas time, once all the visitors and all the, I call it people that have stayed, I end up using the second bathroom tub where it was nice and cozy in there and nobody was in there. And I could start my tomato starts in there, but, for some reason she takes exception to having, 20 containers spread all over the bathroom. So anyway, that's life. If temperatures are higher or lower, the germination period actually can take a lot longer. So if the temperature is too high or too low or too wet, sometimes they just don't germinate at all. And we also recommend pre-soaking your seeds before placing in the starting mix. So when you're going to start these plants? Well, guess what? We're doing this program now, so be prepared. Depending on where you are, you're probably going to be looking at trying to start them within the next few weeks, or if not now. And so, but timing is everything when it comes to growing tomatoes. The season is going to be best extended at the beginning rather than trying to stretch it until late June or July. And the reason for that is that in Galveston County, by late June to early July, the summer heat and the repetitive high nighttime temperatures above 75 degrees effectively end the production of quality tomatoes. Why is that? The pollen will no longer drop and it will no longer pollinate, and what you end up with is flower drop. So, this is critical because, when you're looking at an 80 or 90 day variety, so like an heirloom, and you plant this thing in March in 90 days, well, guess what? When you start counting off, you're going to the first maturity of these tomatoes are going to be right in that June period. So you're not going to get a lot. So if you want to be growing those here in Galveston County, you need to start much earlier. So to extend the season. Also, if you want, like the vining varieties, you want to start that earlier. So it's all going to be dependent on what we call the first frost. So anyway, also, stink bugs and diseases such as early blight can also bring the season to a close. In the fall, you will need to beat the first frost. But in the spring, you don't plant until the first frost in your area you feel is basically finished. And in Texas, that's a little tough, but you may have to protect it. So anyway, so let's talk about it. In spring, give you some ideas of what, the things that are documented. It's best to start your seeds somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks before the average last spring frost date. So in Galveston Island, the last, normally, and then we're using this from data and collection from the sources that we have, NOAA and stuff like that. But in Galveston Island, generally the last spring frost is recorded at January the 31st. So if you're going to go back 6 weeks to 8 weeks, well, guess where you are? You're just about in that period now. Texas City, Lamarck is around February the 9th. And you can see Dickinson, Santa Fe, February the 12th. So, I'm saying this is when you're probably going to be trying to plant your tomatoes. League City, Friendswood, Kemah is February the 20th. Clear Lake, Houston, and probably even north of Houston, it's around March, first week in March that you're going to be planting. So when you're trying to figure out when you're going to start your seedlings, this is what you need to really consider in your timing. So we're saying that we tend to recommend that to guarantee the best plant plants at the right time, we tend to make 2 to 3 starts. I normally do 2, and then put them about 2 days apart. And then basically I start mine, the first start will be, December 26th to the 30th, and then the second start will be in January, about second week in January. But if you want to, you know, early planting and you plan and want to try to get, you know, you may have to nurse them along through any of the Texas crazy weather we have. But, you know, if you want early planting, you can do February, plan for February the 1st to the 12th. And then I call it normal early planting is the 13th to 20th. And, you know, you can see the late planting would be March 1st to 10th. So when you're looking at March 1st to the 10th, you have to be careful that you're not having a 90-day variety. And then, you know, you do much better with an earlier variety. And we're tending to, here in Galveston County, to use more of the early variety and the mid-season varieties to be most successful. The average for now for fall, it's a whole different thing. Now we have to try to have our tomatoes start producing before that first frost hits. So the first fall planting, you will need to know the variety, and if it's early, mid, or long season variety, determine when you start. You see, it's the same thing. Early season varieties do very well for fall planting. I've done very well this year with Parks Whopper, and I've done Celebrity, and I've also done 4th of July. Heirlooms are difficult. You're going to probably have to do, you have to start them real early, and you're going to probably have to somewhere along the way protect them when the first frost. So the frost will kill a tomato plant very easily. So you'll have to really cover and protect them to try to get something out of the production. But it's always nice to have in the Thanksgiving and Christmas period fresh tomatoes instead of having something from the store that tastes like yuck. Anyway, but the average first frost dates that we have officially in Galveston Island is December the 17th. Texas City, Lamarck is December the 9th. Dickinson is December 2nd. League City, Friendswood, Kemah is November 28th. And the Clear Lake, Houston area is also November 28th in that area. So it's, you can kind of see that the closer you get to the Gulf, there's like, I call it temperature rings that affect the growth. So, I mean, be aware of that. Here in Galveston County, you know, these rings are kind of close, and these are the cities that are in these rings. As you get north of Houston, the rings get much bigger as far as the frost and temperature. So, you know, you might be midway up to Dallas with the same ring that's associated with the north part of Houston. So for the fall, you know, this is going to be people like, you know, we usually start out tomatoes for fall planting in July. And you can see around the 4th of July, mid-July. And we are planting basically anywhere from the middle of August to September the 1st, which means that sometimes you have to protect them from excessive heat and sun. You may put a little shade thing over them. I tend to start mine and plant mine with my early seasons in the September 1st to 10th ring, but I use early season like the Parks Whopper, which is 65 days, or the 4th of July or Early Girl or something like that. And I've been successful doing that. So you don't quite have to fight the heat of the August sun. And you do have sometimes in September some hot days, but you can usually handle that. So the average starting times for Galveston fall planting is, again, you want to do this about 10 days apart. And again, we make the two starts. You can see this is at our Discovery Garden. At the same time, we're growing cabbage. And you'll see in the background, we have our Early Girl tomatoes. I mean, producing for the food banks that we donate to. So, I mean, you can see we grow a lot of fall tomatoes. But anyway, kind of taking a left turn here. So, you know, you kind of know when you need to start them. Now, you know what varieties. You can look at what we recommended, or you can find something else that grabs your interest. But where are you going to buy these things? That's always a question. You know, where the heck are you going to find these seeds, and how do I get them? And also, you should have had a handout that says seeds and gardening supply sources. And you can see, you know, there's tomato growers, there's Burpee, there's Totally Tomatoes, If you look at the list, you know, you can, I've given you the websites and stuff, and you can order those. It takes today usually a couple of weeks to get you tomato seeds, and you know, have a lot of fun with this stuff, and enjoy this. You can kind of see from that we have local areas that also supply, you know, some of the good stuff that we recommend. So you can see the handout and go over that, and you can get started with that. So now you've got the seeds. How in the heck are you gonna get these things going? So there's a number of ways you can start your seeds. We're recommending a seal pack, or you can use the 50 millimeter Jiffy peat pellets and trays. You want sterilized seed starting soil or a soilless mix. You're going to probably need you know, with a watering can or pump sprayer. Now, one of the things that Sam taught me is I use a pump sprayer with the nozzle removed, and that's how I water my tomatoes. I can actually, you know, be very selective when I pull the trigger as to how much water. I also tend to put when I plant mine up, I grow them in 12 to 16 ounce styrofoam cups from the dollar store. You can get 20 for $1. The other thing is make sure you have plant tags, labels. You can also use reuse the 4-inch pots that you maybe found from, you know, from buying other plants from some of the big box stores. You're also going to need water soluble plant food. You're going to need a thermometer. A dibble is more or less nothing but a pointed object like a ice pick or something like that. You can need a spoon, and you're going to need a permanent marker. And with that, you can pretty well get going. You can get a good seed starter mix. You know, you can see that most of the big box stores will have this, and it's readily available. If you don't want to do that, you can mix your own. You can use 50% sifted peat moss, 25% vermiculite, 25% crushed perlite. And all of these are usually readily available online, or sometimes at even the big box stores, believe it or not. But the other thing we want to discuss with you is understanding the lingo sometimes on the seed package. So if you look at the package on this thing, you'll see that first off, how many seeds are you getting? And this lately has a huge variety of that. Many of the seeds now, you may find just 10 seeds in the package, which you look at the price, you go, oh my goodness. But those are usually hard to find seeds, or they're ones that are just coming out. They're new varieties. Generally, as to what happens there. But in general, I would say most seed packages would have anywhere from 25 to 30 in a seed package, which makes it very economical to grow your seeds. So, and it has a weight, sort of thing. So plant requirements are on there usually. The biggest thing is the type of tomato that you have. You look for that. The variety, there's usually have a description about how, what it is and how it is. The planting guide. Also critical is the use by date, and also the suggested start of your area. So when we want to start, now let's just say we've got our seeds, and so how we get these things going. So first thing we're going to do in the process is to fill the cell packs or peat pots with a good sterilized potting soil or soilless mix. Then you're going to firmly and gently, but don't pack the soil into it. Then using a dibble, make a hole in the center of the potting mix, about 1/4 of an inch deep, and then you're going to drop in. I usually do 2 seeds. You can do 3 if you feel like you really need to do that. But in general, 1 to 2 seeds from a good variety, from a good supplier, is usually sufficient. But then once you've got that hole, you're going to refill the hole. So you're going to actually fill that hole up where you've planted that 1/4 inch deep seed. And then you're going to press it firmly. and then you're going to moisten it. And now when I say moisten it, I'm not saying drown it. You're going to keep this thing very moist and not wet. And but one of the things I will always tell you is never allow the seed mix or any seed to dry out. It kills it. If this happens, it's toast. If it dries out, you're done. You'll have to start over. So we tend to cover these packs with that so that you have a little greenhouse effect that happens as the moisture evaporates. It's collected and reabsorbed. And so clear plastic domes create a mini greenhouse, and other trays and containers you can put inside if you're not using the entire tray. And don't forget to put ID tags. I mean, as we get older, I can vouch for, at least for myself. You think you're going to remember something, but I can guarantee you won't. And you look at these things and say, what the heck are these? If cell packs are not available, there's other things you can use. I tend to use a lot of the Jiffy. You can see they're actually peat pellets, and they're encased in like a little grow cloth of some sort. What I like about these is that they're easy to store. I guarantee you they're sterilized, because when they collapse them like this, they take all the moisture out. And to activate them, you basically pour water, and then they expand quite high. But you don't have to do this. I mean, these Jiffy devices, this little greenhouse, these peat pellet things that you see here, probably get anywhere from $6.50 to $7-8 for this thing. And there's 16 in there. And if you want more, you can, you got other varieties. But these are usually ready available at even Walmart, I think, has these in their garden center. If you don't want to spend that kind of money, you can, one thing I've grown for many years, and my dad did as well, he used egg cartons. And you can see on the left there, you can use the egg cartons. We use the top as a collecting point and the bottoms as to grow from. You can use that to start your seeds. If you don't have a plastic dome, you can use a clear plastic Ziploc bag sealed. But you're going to have to put holes in it to kind of let it breathe. So, I mean, you don't have to have any kind of fancy grow system to start these things up. You will need light of some sort. So, again, you need it somewhere in the temperature. Place it where it's going to be 70 or 80 degrees. And it's going to take somewhere from 7 to 10 days. And then once the seedlings emerge, you're going to have to remove the plastic dome. The process, once the seedlings emerge, like you said, remove, and you have to put them in full light somewhere. You can either have a light source, or you have a window that has a good light source. But you're going to have to do this to prevent the seedlings from stretching and producing a weak-leggy plant, which we call etulation. It considers setting up a grow lighting system. A brighter light will help keep the seedlings short and stout. You can kind of see they've just come up. They're looking for light, and it doesn't take but a day or two to get very leggy and just fall over, sort of thing. I mentioned the word etulation. It can be a problem when the first leaves appear. Etulation is long, spindly growth caused by poor lighting conditions. The plant will tend to be more yellowish because chlorophyll is lacking from improper photosynthesis. And you will see it at its worst when trying to start plants, because you don't have enough sunlight to properly enable photosynthesis. The plants know that they're light starved, and hormones kick in trying to grow tall enough to get it. And believe me, this happens within a day or two. It happens very quickly. The cure is to start later when you have more sunlight possibly, or find a way to provide strong enough artificial light so the plant grows properly. The cotyledons, we call them seed leaves, or the first leaves. You can see these are the first leaves that appear in the 7th day. These are you'll see the type of leaves, they're just skinny leaves. But these use the seed storage tissue to develop a root system. In other words, that's produced by the seed tissue itself. And then once that comes up, then it starts getting the light, and then it starts photosynthesis occurs, and then a root system will begin. So the true leaves then start to appear. You can see that the small long leaves are the first leaves, and about a week later, once the photosynthesis has begins allowing the plant to grow and develop. And you can see that those seed pods, you see how they expand, and you can see how big they get from what we were showing you for those Jiffy seed starters. We feel that the seedlings are going to need abundant light. And if you're going to use artificial light, it should be of a bright white or high frequency when growing vegetables. And you're also going to probably need a low velocity fan, which will help strengthen the seedling stem. You need to have it moving to have the hormones basically kick in to strengthen the seeds at the base to keep them from getting, from flopping over. So sometimes if you don't have a fan, kind of blow them on it gently and having them move, when you put them outside, they'll tend to flop over because they haven't been strengthened at all. So anyway, giving you a little bit of, when you're looking for lights and stuff, we'll get into that a little bit later. When you're running your lights, and particularly when you're using fluorescent lights, you need to keep the seedlings at a max 2 inches away from the lights. So in other words, from the top, you can kind of see on the bottom right light structure, you can see they're about 2 inches. The fluorescent lights are about 2 inches away from the top of the plants, and that's what you want to do. You also don't want to overwater. Again, keep them damp, but don't get them overwatered. They don't want to be sitting in water, and which will cause dampening off, which is a fungus. You can see right where the soil line a fungus starts, and it will just kill the plant, the seedling. To avoid any hesitation in the plant growth, they need to be shifted to larger pots as they grow. When the seedlings have fully developed their first set of true leaves, this is when you want to be ready to transplant them into a larger container. So in other words, if you start them in the cell packs or in the pea thing now, you're going to go up to a 16-ounce styrofoam cup or a 4-inch container. Anything that you got, you're going to go up in the size of what you're going to actually transplant into the ground. So anyway, so when you do this, with the container you put them in, you're going to be transplanting into a large container, but it must also have a good potting soil mix to grow until time to be planted in the garden. And this is using the styrofoam cups. I mean, we can also use, again, used 4-inch pots. But here what we're going to do, we're going to punch a hole in the bottom to make sure that it doesn't hold water. And then we'll transplant that into these styrofoam cups. He's using, this is Sam, he's using a soldering iron. You can use a dibble, punch about 4 holes at the base to make sure that the water. I also tend to, when I go there and punch the holes, I'm also normally labeling the tomato, and I write with a felt tip onto the actual styrofoam cup to make sure that I know what it is. And then sometimes I'll use the styrofoam cup, put a little bit of soil in it, and then use that as a tag until I get proper tags put on. So you can see pulling them out is sometimes tricky, but this is when you want to have a good root structure, and you can see about the time you're going to transplant them into something bigger. You're going to bring them in. Now, one of the things when you bring them into in transplanting them, you're going to try to bring them so that there's a little bit of, that's deeper than a little bit of the level of the soil that you have. So then you can water them. You can see we're using a watering can. As you can tell, it's probably one of Sam's slides, because I don't know if anybody has frozen Tropicana anymore, but anyway, anything like that will work. I mean, as you can, just so long as there's drainage through it. And he's using the watering the can to water his tomatoes. And transplanting them, you can do a number of things like that. I find the styrofoam cups good because I can easily get them in and out, and they're easily handled. And it's not very. It's the cost of that, and then the only thing is it's the getting rid of them. Okay, transplanting. There are a couple ways to feed your seedlings, and one is to add a soluble fertilizer to the water. And then when the plants are 3 or 4 weeks old, you're going to use a water-soluble plant food of about 1/4 strength on a weekly basis. But you're going to fertilize sparingly. It's a 6-12-6. You can see we tend to use Has to Grow. You can find other manufacturers out there that supply this type of fertilizer. So, but Has to Grow is one we use very commonly in our area. You can see when you're going to grow the transplants, here's a method you can use. So this is a shelving material with, that's been converted to grow lights, and that you don't have to do that. And you can see there's a way to adjust. Bright lights, again, when we're talking about lighting, you'll always see a lot of the lights classified in lumens. And lumens is a measure of visible light to the human eye from a light source. So in other words, the more light, the stronger the light, the better it will be. It may have watts, but watts is actually the total amount of electricity consumed. So sometimes the higher the wattage means that it's burning more and giving more light, but not necessarily. And then what we're looking for here is that the light output has the type of light has a frequency. You know yourself that light like reds and blues all have a frequency. So when we're getting like some of the fluorescent lights, you're going to be looking for what we tend to call bright white, which is a high frequency light, somewhere in the 5,000 K to 6,500 K area. So, and again, you want to keep these lights about 2 inches as they grow from the top of the plants. Incandescent lights and regular use LED bulbs don't work. You can use the, I think they're called CFL lights, which are fluorescent, I call them twirly lights, will work. But LED lights that you normally buy for lighting are not grow lights and don't work as well as incandescent. It's a lot of heat, but it doesn't produce the amount of heat the light frequency that you want to grow your starts. And again, as I said, the fan circulation, you can see on the other side, I have this one on a ladder that can be moved up and down, and you can kind of see how this will work. You can just, as long as you have a nice steady flow on it. It doesn't have to be, and you don't want a high velocity. You want just a slow push to get the starts moving back and forth. What's come into play now is the LED grow lights. And what you're looking for there is a full spectrum panel arrangement. And these things now have really come down in price, more or less as a result of the marijuana growing industry. And, this one of the things that we've transferred our growing light system at the Discovery Garden to LED lights, and we have been very successful with them. I think they're more or less on a shelving type arrangement, and they're about 12 inches by 12 inches, and we use a couple per the 24-inch, 48-inch span, I think, of the cabinet, which may be not exact distance, but anyway. One of the advantages of this is that it also it will last a lot longer, which again, you're going to have to see how many lumens this thing puts out. Sometimes they don't put out as much as you would require. And generally, when you buy these things, the distance from the plants are part of what the instructions are. And you can normally you can place them permanently. You don't have to adjust like the fluorescent lights 2 inches above as they grow. I have found though that in the starts, I tend to put them under some elevated point when they're really small starts. And I find I get a better result than just leaving them too far apart. It seems to maybe dissipate to some degree. But the LED lights, why the pricing is really big. The one you see in there actually is for greenhouses. It has a cooling fan. They're absolutely huge, and they're actually for greenhouses. So anyway, you can look online. There's plenty out there. If you need recommendations, you can contact us and get to me, and I'll show you some of the things that's out there that has worked if you require that. You can see growing the transplants on this particular shelving arrangement. On the right, I'm looking at the center one. You can see by having the change, you can there's an area that it's growing more. You can actually raise it. The other ones, it started less, a later start, and you can move it up and down. There's different ways to handle this. And another view you can see is 2 inches away. They're come up. And what happens is that when you get the starts, they're coming out and you place them under the lights, they tend to stop about that way. And then they'll start greening up nicely. And then you'll start seeing the true leaves show up. There's different ways you can do it. You can use change, you can use any type of mechanism to be able to adjust them. This one can be easily raised or lowered without much effort. So this is one that you'll see me growing sometimes. In this arrangement here, I have one like this, and I can probably produce around 200 tomato starts at a time with this. So if you really want 200, you go right ahead. You may not need this, but it's gives you some idea what you can produce from something like this. You can also find a sunny room with a good window in it. It needs to be a cool room, somewhere in that 70 degree range, and don't keep it too warm. And it needs and little light, and they will come leggy. So another one you can use again by using you can use one light above it on a panel next to a window or something like this that may be available. We tend to put timers on it because they're nightshade, and basically we let them go to sleep. And we tend to put the lights on anywhere from 12 to 18 hours, but you need to turn them off for a while, because that's when the tendency for nightshades is that they will absorb all of the energy from the leaves during the light period, and then at night then they grow. So it's funny when sometimes with tomatoes, when you get up in the morning, you'll see your tomatoes have grown noticeably from the previous day. Then we got to talk about hardening them off. Basically, prior to transplanting, we want to adapt your plants to the outside conditions. Just don't take them out of the nice, warm, comfy area and put them in the ground. They don't like it. And you're going to do this for at least 2 to 3 days. You're going to protect them from any wind and direct sun. And you're going to gradually expose them to garden conditions as weather permits. And the main reason you're going to do this is that hardening off, it strengthens the plant's cell structure. It also results in a more rapidly growing plant after transplanting into the garden. So you can kind of see, one of the things that also, if you don't have what I call the waterproof trays and stuff, you can go to the dollar store and get these metal trays, and they will also work as tray starts. So you don't have to, if you don't need it, you don't need to have specialty stuff. You can buy a lot of stuff at the dollar store. But you can kind of see where these are hardening off, and these are about ready to go on the ground. And you can also see that on these, I labeled the cups with the information on which varieties and stuff. And also I'll probably label when they got planted. Here's another one. You can harden them off as well. Uh, and this is just a screen porch that with something on the back, so you can also do that. Greenhouses, we'll talk about that. A lot of people use greenhouses, but we highly recommend before you get started that you have a course. They're expensive, and you need to understand what you're getting into for a greenhouse. All too often here in Galveston County, the greenhouses end up being a storage facility because of the heat we have that we have to contend with greenhouse. If you come to our Discovery Garden, you will see that we have a different variety of and design of greenhouse that's especially designed for the an area that has a hot environment. And we tend to grow plants even in August in the greenhouse that we have designed. Another thing you can use is cold frames or hotbeds. You may have seen these before. The cold frames are simply a box, generally with a wood frame. It's slanted and it's hinged and it's covered with glass or clear plastic or fiberglass. The hotbed is actually the same thing, except that it provides heat as a heating cable that's used on piping, say up north, and it's used primarily for seed starting. So you can use this as a seed starting for the outside if you don't have the facilities to do it inside. So, and then there's always others. Your greenhouses. Well, you can always make something and make something up and then use this as well, something like this as well. It doesn't have to be anything special. Just just use your ideas of how to handle this. This one is just an old table that's been converted with some old screening on it, and then a plastic oven, and voila, you have a greenhouse with some water to water, and you can handle that as well. So coming to an end, we hope that the results of a good plan on how to start your seedlings are going to result in something like this. But what we really want you to do is something that end with the results like this for attending the classes. Thank you guys for attending the course.